Hey everyone, Staci Wallace here, and I am so excited that you're joining us tonight live on another incredible webcast that's going to talk to you about how to develop your business, how to expand your reach. Tonight we are talking about the power of collaboration. I'm really excited tonight. I'm sporting the t-shirt of Be Selfless, some good friends of mine that sent me this shirt. Just another collaborative effort of people with a common idea coming together to do good for others. When we talk about the power of collaboration tonight, we are going to be talking about how you can take your current influence and magnify it literally 100, 1,000-fold simply through a simple word called collaboration. I'm going to jump into our slides real quick so that you can follow me along. Again, Staci Wallace here, and I encourage you to track with this entire series of what we're doing when we talk about developing your idea, your big idea, your concept, your business, and taking it to a place where others can actually participate. Now, what we're talking about tonight is the art and the power of collaboration. And one of the things that I'm excited about is, so many people want to know, how did you build such a massive network? How did you build such a big business? How have you been able to do what you've done? A lot of people know that I don't have pedigree. I didn't graduate from college. And yet I've been tracked by tremendous success. Tonight we're going to talk about some amazing stories, some of the books that I've written, the CDs I've recorded, the stages I've been on have all been because of the power of collaboration. And tonight I'm going to let you in on that, because I'm sure there's people around you. Maybe right now you're looking at, how can I expand my reach? How can I hit tipping point with my idea? How can I get more people involved in my network? How can I increase my social influence? Well, tonight we're going to talk about that and how it comes by you not trying to do everything yourself, but by learning the art of collaboration. Now let's start off with just that simple word, collaborate. What does it mean? Well, it means to work with another person or group in order to achieve or do something. Unfortunately, most of us were raised in a society. This is really the first generation where collaboration is the norm. Up until now, so Generation Z right now, like my kids who are 13, 14 years old, they are going to totally understand collaboration because they're growing up in a collaborative world where social media is so hot and people are on, they're virally connecting, they're sharing ideas about Minecraft and shooting videos. Here's how I cracked the code, right? Well, growing up before Generation Z, everybody's been about my space, like what I have inside of my own intellect, and a lot of people have held it to themselves. Well, here we see we're having to break out of that mindset and learn how to collaborate. I think we need to learn how to spell the word there on our slide, COLLABORATE. That would be the first thing we want to do. That's awesome, because that's probably going to be misspelled a lot on this slide deck. Oh no, there we go. Good. So I love it. Collaboration 101. Let's look at some of the points about collaborating. Is number one, you cannot learn everything by yourself. Think of all of the vast intellect that is out there right now. It seems, although we know inventions and creativity is going to constantly expand, it seems like everything you could possibly ever need to know is out there, whether it's through Google or whether it's through crowdsourcing or whatever it happens to be. Surely it's out there. Well, the beautiful thing about it is if you only stay what's in your mind and your capabilities and your talents, you're never going to be able to maximize your full potential. They say right now we use about 2 to 5% of our potential. Well, what if we were able to use just even 10%? It would probably blow everything up, right? Because we only use 2 to 5%. Well, how do we expand that? Well, one of the fastest ways to expand your potential is to get out of yourself. There's so many people that live in the disease of me. It's all about me. It's all about my ideas. It's all about my contracts. I'm not going to share anything with you unless you sign on the dotted line. That way of thinking is so archaic, tired, and old that it is it's like beehive hairdo, right? It is old fashioned. And so if that's still the way you think, it's as old fashioned. It's funny because recently we were talking to a group of folks. There were most of them in their 80s, and we were talking about how important it is for them to allow their community, which they're trying to sell property within their community. It's a retirement area, really a active living area. But those that were more like 75 and older, 80 and older, did not want anything of their community to be posted on Facebook. They were too concerned that somebody would find them because of security issues. So there's some people that live in the mindset that, you know, having yourself known equals insecurity. It means that somebody's going to hunt you down and rob you. Whereas here we live in a society where kids are tweeting, Instagramming everything, and the walls of security are completely dropped. Whether good or bad, they're completely dropped. The challenge is if you don't move with society, you get caught in the squat, like my dear friend Zig Ziglar said. So here's a perfect example on collaboration. If you've been one that you were raised and honestly you like to do things yourself, you get really frustrated giving the reins to other people. If you can't be done right, you just want to do it yourself. If that's the way you've been thinking, chances are you're going to have some problems in your business development. Because we're in a society where you definitely want to collaborate. You can't learn everything by yourself. Well, here's another thing. No one of us is as smart as the whole of us. So what does that mean? That means you might come into a group. You know, I know that when I got back into direct sales, for example, one of the things I was most determined to do is ensure that the walls of my team drop down and that we have collaboration so that people can see, you know, instead of everybody, now there's something good to, you know, healthy competition and camaraderie, but if it means that there's actually resistance of creativity, then what happens is it actually slows down the growth of good ideas. And so one of the things I always made sure is I don't care whose team you're on, what company you represent, I want to collaborate with you. I think that you've probably got brilliant ideas because you come from a background and a mindset that's totally different than mine. I'm going to show you in a minute, even graphically, how that works to expand your influence, whether it's through social media, whether it's online marketing, or whether it's just in general. You want to expand your influence. Collaboration 101, no great product exists due to only one person. Okay, so wherever you're sitting right now, think about it. Think of one great product, just anything, maybe your favorite candy or your favorite company or your favorite drink, a Coca-Cola or Pepsi or Kit Kat or whatchamacallit, Apple, Microsoft, whatever. No great product. There's just not one out there that exists because of one person. It requires collaboration, different people who play different roles. Even scripturally, this is talked about. You know, even the body of Christ, for example, is made up of a whole bunch of different parts. You might have an arm and you might have a leg, but it makes up a whole body. Well, this is the great thing about collaboration. If you work together with other people, valuing other people's ideas, you have the ability to grow so much bigger than you ever could in and of yourself. Here's a final one. There's no such thing as a self-made leader. I think probably the funniest thing I see is when I'm on social media and I see somebody say they have on their title, self-made millionaire. I'm like, what? I mean, that is the funniest, most absolutely ridiculous title somebody could ever give themselves. I mean, it is a sign of pride, it's a sign of prejudice, and it's a sign of ignorance. There is no such thing as a self-made leader because your mama brought you into this world and your mama could take you out. Every single one of us, whether good or bad, we have been made into who we are as a result of the collaborative efforts of a lot of people's influence in our lives. And so when you're thinking about building or developing your business, you start to consider these things. Okay, so if collaboration is that important, am I collaborating with the right people? Am I collaborating with the right idea thinkers? Am I collaborating, or am I just sitting back trying to do things myself? Am I an information vacuum, or am I an information source? You want to become an information source. In just a minute, I'm going to show you how and why. Collaboration is the key. A good example is, you know, one of you guys will learn that I love Michael Jordan growing up. I was a basketball player, so played for many years, and one of my greatest players was Michael Jordan growing up, and I loved watching him victory after victory. I loved watching him go into the finals and having the flu and overcoming that, his team not even knowing about, all these great stories. And people would talk about his leadership and that there was nobody like him. And of course, we know there's always going to be somebody that comes along that's better than you. But if you go back in his story, sure, everybody celebrates the quote unquote victories, but what they forget is the collaborative effort it took to get that leader where it took somebody literally rejecting him from the high school basketball team. It took that coach rejecting him in order for him to have the tenacity and the fortitude to fight through adversity to become an epic basketball player. He wasn't that good. So rejection actually became an opportunity. Like Einstein says, within every challenge, there lies opportunity. The challenges that you're going through right now, maybe you feel like you're in a rut, you can't get enough network growth, you can't get enough sales, you're just not getting enough traction online, whatever it is, adversity either causes you to break, or it will cause you to break records. It'll cause you to seek out the mentors, the partners, the collaborative leaders that you need to align with in order to get yourself to the next level. I love what Steve Jobs said. He said, my model for business is the Beatles. They were four guys that kept each other's negative tendencies in check. They balanced each other, and the total was greater than the sum of the parts. Basically what Jobs is saying here is in order to have a great win, you're going to have a great team. And so I want to challenge you right now as we go through the rest of this hangout is be thinking about who am I surrounded by? Put on that owl of wisdom. Who are you surrounded by? Who are your friends? Who do you spend the most time with? Who are you connected to? Who do you hang out with in social media? Who do you hang out with on the weekends? Who will determine where you end up in life. So Collaboration 101, let's just look at a couple of historical precedent stories of great collaborative stories. Now, we know Wozniak and Jobs, obviously, they didn't even have a clue what they were creating in the garage when they started a couple beatniks. But what an incredible story of a collaborative effort. Of course, we look today and we see Steve Jobs' name all over the place for Apple. But really, Apple would never have existed had it not have been for the collaborative efforts of two guys coming together going, hey, let's do something cool, right? Well, think about Jobs and Gates a few years later when Apple is completely going bankrupt, and Jobs had basically been fired from his own company. And yet again, in order to resurrect the company, it couldn't be resurrected by Jobs himself. It had to be resurrected because they needed cash infusion. And at that time, Bill Gates, Microsoft, they were realizing that if we don't have Apple, we have a monopoly, and that's never good for the marketplace. So Gates invested $150 million into Apple in order to bail Apple out, creating yet another cool collaboration, totally competitive markets, competitive companies, but created the collaborative tension necessary in order for there to be growth. Of course, the Wright brothers, a lot of people say you can't work with siblings. Well, the Wright brothers is a great example of great minds, opposite type thinkers that came together in order to literally change history. And that's a lot of times we try to think of people who are like us. We don't want to work with people who are just like us because we want people to work who are just like us because we think we'll get along with them better. But the truth is, collaboration and tension creates dynamics that allow you to go where you could never go by yourself. Einstein was another. Of course, Einstein gets credited for the law of relativity, but what's beautiful, or theory of relativity, but what's beautiful about it, if you research it, Einstein would take walks daily with other scientists and mathematicians, asking them about their research and interviewing them and getting to know them, all the while trying to create something that had never been done before, break through laws that had never been broken. Everything he did was collaboration, even though when you see pictures on Google, you only see Einstein in front of a chalkboard. The truth of the matter is that is very far from the truth. Einstein was a great collaborator. Of course, you look today, some modern sources, and one of my favorite authors is that of John Maxwell. And of course, he's written book after book after book, but what most people don't know is some of the greatest authors of our time and leadership authors, they were not actually the writers of their own book. They started off by collaborating with ghostwriters who wrote a lot of their books for them, yet somebody has to be on the cover, right? Somebody has to be the billboard. This is the power of collaboration. And if right now you're thinking, wow, I just don't have the strength to really be that forefront person, maybe you want to collaborate with somebody who is a billboard and say, what can I do to serve you? Because I feel like if I attach myself to you, I'm going to be able to do better myself. You know, there's a lot of people who don't like to speak, don't like to communicate. So they will attach themselves to great communicators. In fact, that's even biblical. If you think about Moses, Moses actually had a stutter, wasn't a great communicator, but he had Aaron and Miriam that were able to go with him so that he could actually communicate more effectively. It's amazing when you look throughout history how many examples there are of collaboration. So maybe you feel weak in one area. Find collaborators that you can collaborate with in order to strengthen your weakness. I've heard a lot of people, recently I heard Gary Vaynerchuk was talking about how insane it is for you to focus on trying to develop your weaknesses. Well, he was very graphic with the way he explained it, as he always is. But what I got out of it that he didn't necessarily say was, because I don't believe just walk away from your weaknesses. I say staff your weaknesses. Collaborate with your weaknesses. If you're not good at graphic design and you're good at something else, maybe you're good at some type of technology, but you're not real good at design and creativity. Well, find somebody who is, because I promise you, people with creativity need technology. And so you come together. Maybe you're not really good on stage, but you're really good at writing scripts. Well, partner with somebody who's a really good communicator. If you look at the presidency, obviously the presidency, you got one guy that happens to be the one that everybody sees on TV making, but there's a lot that goes into a presidential speech. There's a lot of writers. There's a lot of collaboration that goes in. And the key right now, as an entrepreneur building your own business, you've got to figure this out, because if you try to do everything yourself, you're going to fail. There is no leader, there's no product, and there's no company that tries to do everything. The best collaborations is what I want to look at, because as you seek collaborative partnerships, I want you to think about what are the best collaborations. Now, unfortunately, old school collaborators, it's all about transaction. Now, those are generally the me-centric leaders, me-centric entrepreneurs. They're the ones that are going to come to you and say, well, I'll only share with you if I get 50% of the deal, sign on the dotted line, here's the contract. And obviously they're just tapped into WIFM, what's in it for me, right? Those are transactional leaders. And honestly, leaders prior to this most recent generation Z, that's the way a lot of people think. And the older they are, the more they think. Now, actually, it comes to a point when a person is beyond their money-making years that they actually flip into a transformational leader. That's when they're thinking legacy, and it's not about me. I want to leave a mark, so I want to do good for others. But there is a huge amount of leaders that still think only transactionally. So they're only going to listen to your ideas if there's a transaction involved. They're only going to give credit to your ideas if they get something out of it. Well, transactional leadership versus transformational leadership is night and day. One moves very lethargically because it's all about WIFM. It's all about me. It's all about me. Transformational leadership is what this generation is being built on, and that's why so much rapid movement is taking place. Wikipedia, for example, because it's about changing the world. It's about changing lives. It's about creativity and innovation. It's about doing good for others. It's about, let's just create a common source so that we can have better ideas, better future, better children, better schools. The best collaborations are not transactional collaborations. The best companies didn't come because two people came together and said, let's create a company. No, it came because some kid was doing a school research paper and decided they were going to create something like Facebook, right? It wasn't transactional, it was transformational. And where it really got funky is transactional, when it became transactional. But what was amazing is when we take an idea that was just built on, how could I do something that would really do good for others? That's transformational. When you can collaborate on that level, doesn't mean that you won't eventually have contracts and things like that involved. But if you can truly remain transformational in the core of your collaborations, then you're powered by relationships. Then you're powered truly by people. You're powered by social initiative. You're powered by cause. And because of that, you begin to think outside of the box. In other words, like this picture here, a lot of ideas come together to form an even bigger idea because it's not restricted to contracts. It's not restricted to a transaction. This is even in relationships is, I'll be your friend as long as you agree with me. That's a transactional relationship, meaning that there is a but involved, right? A transformational relationship is one that says, I'm going to be your friend, period. You can hurt me, you can lie to me, I'm still going to be kind to you, and I'm going to be your friend. So it's amazing how the older we get, the harder that becomes because you get wounded and all of that. So when you're talking about collaborations, you want to remain transformational. Let your why lead the collaboration. Let's take a look at two types of leaders, the traditional leaders and then the transformational leaders or collaborative leaders. Traditional leaders, old school leaders, they believe power comes from their position of authority, right? Now, you guys, if y'all have been following along with my Blessed Life podcast, last week we talked about the making of a leader. My son actually gave an incredible dissertation on what is leadership. And he talked about leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not about rank. It's not about title. It's not about how much money you make. It's not about what kind of clothes you wear. It's, are people willing to follow you? And so transformational leadership is about influence. But unfortunately, a lot of traditional leaders, and in his book, Jim Collins wrote in his book, Good to Great, that the most power, and what they did in the book, Good to Great, if you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. They researched 11 of the all-time great companies, and then they did study on what made their CEOs great. It wasn't that they were flashy or that they were out there or they were charismatic. Instead, it was about they were compassionate. They were humble. They weren't seeking to be flashy in who they were. They were seeking to be humble in their existence. They wanted to identify with people, not lord over them. And so traditional leaders, honestly, those are the ones that use position of authority in order to drive themselves up so that others are always beneath them. Here's what's great about collaborative leaders. They believe power is greatest in a collective team. In other words, it's not about what I think should happen, it's about what we think should happen. Let's look at the next thing. Maintain ownership of information. Traditional leaders are like, well, I have to own everything. Whereas collaborative leaders, they openly share information, knowledge. Again, it's not WIFM, it's how can we build something that truly changes the world, right? Traditional leaders, number 3, sometimes listen to the suggestions and ideas from their team, whereas collaborative leaders say, we want the suggestions, we want the ideas, we want to bring them in. We want to actually have a crowdsourcing model that allows people to be heard and feel a part of the solution. Now, if you're thinking about your business right now, you need to be thinking about, do I do this with my team? Am I listening to them? When they come to me with an idea, do I just shrug it off of, oh, well, there they go again? Or do I actually embrace it and say, you know what, put some legs to that and bring it back to me? I'd like to hear more. Because what happens is when you take those ideas and truly begin to implement them to your business, your life, your model, whatever, you'll begin to see that no one leader can do everything. And no one leader should do everything. Number 4, traditional leaders deliver the approved solution to the team. In other words, they just say, you know, leave it with me, we'll figure it out and we'll give it back to you. And I've seen a lot of companies that do that where they say, you know, we'll take your ideas, but we're going to basically give the approved idea versus let's facilitate a brainstorming atmosphere. where people feel that in the midst of brainstorming, solutions will arise and everybody wins. Everybody gets to be a part of the solution. So as you do that, make sure that you're doing that with your team. Maybe you're going to run a t-shirt contest, right? And you want your team to have a t-shirt for an upcoming event. And so you say to the team, okay, so we want everybody to submit your t-shirt ideas. And so instead of going, okay, well, we got the t-shirt ideas and here's the one that won because you picked it. It's better to say, you know what, here are 10 t-shirt ideas. We're going to post all of them. You like them, and the one that gets the most likes by you is going to be the t-shirt we're all going to wear. And so now it's an open source. People are able to vote on it. And now that shirt becomes the shirt of the masses. And everybody now rallies around that shirt. Maybe you put something around it. Tell us why this shirt is important. Tell us why you picked that color. Maybe it goes back to, you know, it's pink because my mom died of cancer and blah, blah, blah. Maybe there's a story behind it. Those are the kind of things that make your team great. So make sure that you're leading your team with a collaborative mindset, a transformational mindset versus a traditional transactional mindset. Okay, so where do you begin? Here's what we're going to do. Number one, we're going to take inventory of who surrounds you, and we're going to search for gold, right? Even in the people that resist your ideas, because there is no such thing as a bad collaborator, right? Now, there's energy demanders, don't get me wrong. There are people who I know, they walk down the hall and you're like, ooh, turn the other way because you don't want to spend time with them. But if we're going to look at where can you gain the most value, honestly, there is a gold mine in everything and everyone. Watch this. So let's say, for example, this is you, and this is your bubble of knowledge, your bubble of creativity, your bubble, your capacity of learning. This is your IQ, your EQ. This represents everything you know, everything you create, and everything you are, right? So let's just say you've started your business and you realize, you know what? I don't have enough knowledge. I need to create some online Facebook posts. I need to be able to do more hangouts. I'm just not enough. And you admit that to yourself. I need help, right? So you think about, well, I need to collaborate with someone who has skills that I don't have. So let's say the second bubble represents somebody with skills you don't have, and maybe they even have a bigger influence. Let's say you have 300 friends on Facebook, but let's say they have 3,000 friends on Facebook. So now all of a sudden you guys start to talk about, you know, maybe we could collaborate on an idea. You know, what I'm really good at is I can create really good PowerPoint presentations. And they may say, well, that's awesome because I've got 3,000 people and I was wanting to do a training for my 3,000 people on Facebook. And I want to do a training on healthcare and how important it is to help people get the right health care, right? I'm totally being random here, but so all of a sudden you come together and those two spots where you overlap, that is your collaborative idea on healthcare. Now, here's what's cool, is you're overlapping in a very, very small spot, but look at what you just gained in network capacity, in collaborative relationships, in social influence. Now, because you're willing to collaborate with that leader with 3,000, you're 300, because maybe they'll post you on their Facebook wall. You now have access to their 3,000 friends, and they have access to your 300 friends. It's a win-win, right? And so what's great about this is take it outside of the social sphere. What if this is just about knowledge? Well, let's say you bring in another person and all of a sudden you're saying, well, we're just kind of collaborating on healthcare and they're really, really good. They've got this great network of people. I happen to do PowerPoint presentations. And the reason why we were reaching out to you is because we know that you've actually been in pharmaceutical sales for years. And they're like, yeah, I am. And so I can narrow this down just instead of just going for all of healthcare, let's really focus on pharmaceutical sales. So now if you will look right there, that little area, that's where all three of you now overlap. It's a very, very small spot of commonality. You might be diverse in every other area of your relationship, but look at where you share, but look what you now have access to. look how big those bubbles are that are bigger than you. You now have access to that first person who maybe had 3,000 friends and maybe knowledge that you've never even thought of when it comes to influence and leadership and healthcare. And maybe there's this other friend, maybe they have about 1,500 friends, but they've got this, all of their friends are involved in pharmaceutical sales. And these are people you would never have ever been able to meet. Because of collaboration, all three of you grow. Your influence expands. Your capabilities expand. Your knowledge base expands because now they have access to somebody that anytime they ever need to get a PowerPoint presentation, they go to you and they're like, could you train me on how to do this? Can I see more? And because you're willing to share, not based on WIFM, what's the transaction, let's sign them. You see how the transaction can jack the whole thing up because it slows things down. It makes somebody feel like, yeah, they're just kind of in it for money. They're just kind of in it for them. They're not really in it to see what we could create together. So the first thing you want to do is take inventory of who surrounds you. And don't digress because somebody's better than you. Don't digress because somebody's different than you. Instead, embrace differences. Let's think about this. Embrace resistance. What does that mean? Obviously, I met my husband at a gym, and he was just a couple of weeks out of the Mr. Oklahoma contest. He was massive natural bodybuilder, and I learned early on. I was a basketball player, so I was more about sprints and making sure that my cardio was up, making sure my three-pointer was on tee. But resistance training wasn't a huge part of my training. I did more resistance training than I did just running long distances for those short twitch actions. But he really taught me about resistance training and how important it is to have the right amount of resistance in order to break down your muscles so that it can grow even stronger and bigger. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to collaboration. You want to embrace even those that resist you. For example, did you ever have a teacher that was just like, they just seemed to be your nemesis? I had a teacher growing up, and she was a music teacher, and I even had a science teacher that did the same thing because I talked a lot, and because when I sang, I didn't sing like a nightingale. I sang, I had grit. I was like Aretha Franklin. I mean, I had soul and grit, and my teachers would always say, oh, there's no way you could ever be a singer because your voice would never sustain. And one person, my science teacher kept trying to convince me that if I didn't slow down, I would die by the time I was 40. And I remember that would play over in my head. And then I began to realize, wait a minute, I cannot let someone else's opinion of me become my reality. Those teachers actually, because I heard their voices, they made me more resilient to prove them wrong than ever before. Now, of course, you guys know I've recorded 5 music CDs, written a number of books, been able to travel around the world singing and speaking. But why is that teacher important? Because the resistance is actually a collaborator to one's greatness. Because if it doesn't kill you, it will make you stronger if you let it. Don't get bitter, get better. Don't let somebody break you down. Let them break you up so that those things that they say against you don't hurt you. My little 13-year-old girl says, Mom, Peyton hurt my feelings. I said, baby, he can't hurt your feelings. You have to give him permission to hurt your feelings. If he said something that wasn't very nice, you just take that, you let it be like water off a duck's back, and let it make you stronger. Let it make you a better, more resilient person. So in collaborating, when you look at it, a lot of people just want to collaborate with people that like them. I tell you, you will weaken your collaborative influence if you only go with people who think like you. Number 2, bullies. Same thing. You might have people who have always talked down about you or said things about you. Bullies are another thing. Embrace that resistance. What are they saying about you? Because voices usually come against you right where God's going to use you. So use those voices to get stronger, like that guy that's pressing those weights. He didn't want to put 5-pound weights on there. No, if he's wanting to get stronger, bigger, more lean, he's going to put more resistance. Allow that resistance. Now, that doesn't mean be psychotic and only go hang out with people who are going to be energy demanders. There's nobody that can sustain that. But what I am saying is don't let them make you bitter. Let them empower you to get better. Coworkers. How many times have you tried to, I don't even want to work with my coworkers. They don't think like me. They're so they're so one track minded, one dimensional. And yet their one dimension might be just different enough from the dimension you think that they would actually bring value to you. I remember a company I was working with, there was somebody in the company, they thought so differently. I mean, I frustrated the tar out of me because they were so numbers minded. That's all they would think about is numbers, 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 numbers. And I kept saying to them, numbers will only grow if you have the right emotion behind the numbers. Now, this is a number of years ago. And I remember that was a real division between us. And eventually I began to think, instead of trying to get that person, it was a woman, to think like me, how can I think more like her? In other words, seek to understand and not just be understood. So I started to think, okay, how that person thinks. Why are numbers so important? Well, all of a sudden, I began to get it. This person has a background in, they were actually a finance person and heavily involved in taxes and CPA, and just a totally different way of thinking than me, a type A creative, right? But suddenly I began to really study the way that person thought. And I began to realize that there are things I've been missing because I've been staying in the creative loop. Diversity, embrace diversity. So maybe you don't like speaking Czechoslovakian, but you know what? If you have Czechoslovakian coworkers that are around you, it probably would do you good to take one of them out for lunch and talk to them and see how you can understand their culture. There might be a golden nugget in the midst of that diversity. Dead-end jobs. Dead-end jobs may seem very resistant, but you know what? They are also collaborating with your greatness because you learn from them. Maybe you've been under a dead-end boss. Learn what not to do. And that way, one day when you're in leadership, you're a better leader. You understand the things that people need more effectively. Coaches, basketball coaches, football coaches, life coaches, those coaches are resistance against you. Let them challenge you. Don't always want people to collaborate with you to make you feel good. Recently, I had somebody that's going through some incredible life changes, and I said, don't just surround yourself with people who agree with you. That is the death of creativity. It's the death of expansion and reproduction. You do not want to have people that always agree with you. Instead, you want to have people confident enough to come to you and say, hey, listen, I've got another way we could look at doing this. That's what coaches are. In fact, my definition of a best friend is somebody who empowers you to be your best at all times. It doesn't mean they agree with you. It doesn't mean they're always fun to hang out with. It doesn't mean that they're the people that you go to the movies with all the time. A best friend is somebody who says what you need to hear, not just what you want to hear. And that's what a great collaborator does. Comes with ideas. You know, when I was a senior vice president of the last company I was with, I would do something called a mind dump where people would come into a room and I would say, listen, and you know, it was natural because this company was an older company, had been around for about 22 years when I was there. And so they were used to kind of, if somebody threw in an idea, they were very familiar with each other. And so they would throw out ideas and they would just tell each other, no, that won't work. And then and immediately I noticed that the person that threw the idea, when people stomped on it, they stopped giving ideas. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. We're going to change the way that works. First off, we rule everything in before we rule anything out. I don't care if it's lame brain, absolutely ridiculous, off the wall. It's going to go on the whiteboard. I want your greatest, most creative, big, hairy, audacious thoughts, ideas, and goals. I want to hear them all. Because although they may be ludicrous, they may lead us to an idea that becomes the idea that opens the door to the next season. If you're with your team, you can do this same thing. In fact, if you're listening and you've got a team of people that you collaborate with or work with, get with them and say, you know what, we need to do a brain dump. And I want to embrace every idea that you've got that you think could make our business better. What is that? and then begin and then mull them over. Don't just write them down and go, okay, well, that was nice and let's move on. If you do that, you just took a whole bunch of seeds and you threw them out the window onto concrete, right? You've got to take those ideas and then you've got to put them in the ground, and then you bring the people back and say, okay, here's the top 10 ideas we came up with. Let's mull these over. What do you guys think about these? This is called watering the seeds, right? And you talk about those ideas, and maybe it comes up with everybody decided, hey, we're going to do a new campaign for our team, and it is going to be the campaign of assets and liabilities. I'm coming up with something else on my head. So assets and liabilities, and we came up with this idea, and assets, what is an asset? And you've got some people who are from church, and you got some people who are from the hood, and so you got some that are saying assets are all the things that everybody loves in life, and it's family, and it's your faith, and it's eternal. And then you got these friends of from the hood that are going, assets, man, that's a girl with a good back end, right? So all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, that gives me an idea, right? And you start going out and you take a microphone and you start going out into the marketplace. There's diversity in having different people in your life. So all of a sudden you ask people in the marketplace with a microphone and your camera, what is an asset to you? And so you start creating this viral campaign based on assets, and you start seeing that there's so many people with different ideas. I know that is very, very random, but that's what I'm saying. Embrace resistance, even in your team. Embrace the diversity. Even embrace your opponents. You may have people that talk against you. Okay, so for example, and I love this one. When I was playing basketball, after I finished my season of playing basketball, for competitive purposes, I went into what was called league play. And I was always on a league, 53 men and me. I was the only woman until the last year. There was another woman that came that was a former NWBA, WNBA player. And so for most of my years, it was always me and men. And what was interesting is I was a good three-point shooter, and I had a lot of guys that when we would start, they would smart talk me, right? They would talk about me being the girl, and they would be silly. And generally they laid off of me until I started dropping 3-pointers. Well, then it got serious, and then they started to apply pressure, right? Because the guys on my team knew if they lay off of me, I'm going to drop the 3-pointer. If they press me, I'm going to drop it down to my post, and we're going to score. So we've really got a really good 1-2 punch. Plus I had some great wing players. So this was really, really good, and we were winning, and we won the tournaments, and we were #1. And we got into this one tournament, and we had some players like former football players, like Deion Sanders and others that were a part of it. And, those guys don't like to lose, obviously. And they're very, very competitive, super, super sweet when, you see them out in the street and they're just normal mom, dad, whatever, but very, very competitive when it came to sports. And I remember the day we had already beat them once in the tournament, and they were coming back, and when they walked in the gym this time, they thought they had me clocked. They immediately walked across the court. Now, my guys, my players, were all out, getting warmed up. Well, they walked in, and purposefully, they hit me on the shoulder. Purposefully, they bounced me. So they bumped me with their shoulder really, really hard, and turned to me and said, we're taking you out early in the game. All right, so a little fear factor going on there, because these are some big kids as compared to me. And so, immediately I went over to my team and I said, all right, so they obviously have a strategy. They're going to take me out. So let's just keep our eyes on that. And immediately, because we knew they were against us, because we knew what their strategy was, we were able to lock and load, because the minute that we knew they were going to double team me, we knew to power up the post, right? And so we beat them. But what I'm saying about this is it doesn't matter who's against you. It doesn't matter how hard the adversity is. You can actually embrace the knowledge of your opponents in order to work for you. That's called collaboration. Now, what was beautiful about it, and I did get taken out of that game, I did get hurt that game, but the great part about it is we knew their game. We knew what they were thinking. And because we knew what they were thinking, we could actually create better plans. When you are thinking about collaborating, when you think about building your network, building your business, there is no such thing as a bad collaborator, because you can even use those that are against you as advantages to your big idea. So embrace diversity. What is that? Embrace physical abilities, age, sexual orientation, race, gender, ethnicity, military experience. It doesn't matter who people are. They come with incredible ideas and concepts. And if you can lay aside your pride, lay aside maybe your preferences, maybe lay aside everything and say, you know what? I am going to open up my mind to hear you, so that together we can create something amazing. Final thing is we're going to talk about embracing the crowdsourcing. This is something that if you haven't been involved in actually collecting a crowd of people and allowing their ideas to germinate into a big idea, that's something you want to think about. Allowing, right now I surround myself by great artists. I have great app developers, people in technology. I've got great friends. I've got people who are like rainbows and unicorns. And then I've got people who are actually extremely type A driven. Some folks who are very creative. You want to make sure that you have a crowd around you and source your crowd so that you're getting the best collaborative efforts. This right here is a little idea, and this is one of the final slides that I want to show you before I show you something that's right now taking place with the Navy. When I start off with a campaign, for example, if I'm wanting to create a campaign, I will throw ideas down on this is just a little napkin, and I just did this randomly. If I was thinking about, I want to do a selfless campaign, I would take the initial idea. And especially if I'm collaborating with others, this one I just did for myself, but if I was with others, I would say, okay, let's get on a whiteboard or let's get in a room and let's think of everything that comes to our mind when we think of selfless, right? And maybe you're creating a selfless campaign for your team. Well, in doing that, I think of humility, servitude, gratitude, memories, selfishness, pride, ego, and you just start writing all these things out until finally you get some really good ideas on the wall, and then together you say, okay, let's take the best 10 ideas here. So if you think of selflessness, how does that end up? Look all the way down at the bottom right. How does that end up as an F5 tornado, right? Well, I can track it through a story that happened to my family when my grandparents lost their home in an F5 tornado, right? Selflessness came because that's why we do a lot of disaster relief. We like to help other people because of my background and my story. So all of a sudden, it may be that, you know what, we wanted to come up with a campaign of selflessness, and that might be how we actually as a team say, this year we're going to do disaster relief. When we go through the tornado season, let's see how many families we can help through disaster relief. That's what collaboration can do for you. Every person would have, these are just a couple ideas I threw down in a second, but everybody would have ideas that you can see how those ideas expand and your thoughts are multiplied. There's actually a scripture that says 1 can put 1,000 to flight, but 2 can put 10,000 to flight, and a triple-fold cord is uneasily broken. The stronger the team, the stronger the cord, the more collaboration that takes place, the harder it is to break you down. Here's a great example of a collaborative effort. This is the Air Force Collaboratory, and it's really the first collaborative platform where they're actually trying to solve some of today's toughest science and technology challenges. The 3 that they're starting with are those right there: search and rescue, mind of a quadrator, and the launch of the GPS IIIF. I'm not really sure what all 3 of those are, but what's incredible about this is these are some of the most brilliant minds coming together for social cause, right? Not coming together to say, well, I'll give you my ideas if I'm on contract with you, WIFM. It's just, we're going to come together and we are going to change the world. If you can begin to think like this with your team, if you can begin to think like this with your company, if you can begin to think like this with your family, instead of telling your family where they're going to go this year for vacation, sit down with them and say, you know what, let's collaborate. What would you guys like to do? And maybe there's a great amount of diversity in your family, And suddenly together you come up with something that everybody feels. That is a win for all of us. You could do this on every area of your life. At the end of the day, though, there's got to be a leader. That means somebody has to arise among you because you want to collaborate and not congregate. I have a lot of leaders that'll sit around and listen to ideas, but then never step up to the plate and say, okay, we're done creating ideas. Now let's take the top 3. Let's choose from the top 3. So someone still has to lead the effort, but I want to encourage you guys, use collaboration as you build your network, as you build your business. Make sure you're tapping into people who are different than you. Make sure that you're thinking about the whole picture and how it can grow. Embrace diversity. Don't just team up with people who think like you. Be okay if people rub you wrong, as long as they're bringing value to the big idea. I hope this has helped you tonight. Again, it's the power of collaboration. I look forward to more great trainings to be able to bring you on ways that you can build your business, increase your influence, and get outside the box. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you again for joining us, and God bless.